fly in there.
I know that building you're talking about.
Yeah. There was a guy parked in front of it. Well, Ginnett had it. He didn't anything that was in his way. He would walk across the street in full traffic and make everybody stop. That was so embarrassing to me, but he did it all the time. So there was somebody right in front. He goes up to that car, gets in the window, turns her car off, grabs her keys, and throws it across the road. He said, "You're going to waste my time, motherfucker. I'm wasting yours." And I'm sitting right there like, what is going on?
And he was never going to find his keys.
Right. It was stupid. I got out, went into the office. It's like, I don't know what's going to happen here, but
I'm not involved.
It ain't good. Yeah, it was a mess. A smart mess.
It makes me wonder where that rage comes from in our species. Where does that rage come from? Because
childhood, that's learned behavior.
Well, yeah. But, we're closer to chimpanzees than we are gorillas. But I say we, humanity. And chimpanzees, they're savage.
Yeah, they go for your head, your nuts, and your hands.
They're savage. And
because
gorillas
they know how to take you down.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, gorillas are like these 600-pound, wrecking balls. They can travel really fast. They can lift something like 20 times their weight. I mean, they're amazing creatures, but they're pretty calm.
Yeah.
When you get down to it, chimps, they got a short fuse, and they are just rogue. I mean, they'll just kill a rival male, and move the females and all the kids into their territory. And so, when you think about, since we're talking today about our creation story, it's very interesting to think about.
How'd you do that?
Think about where we came from and what is the origin of humanity. So today's gray area is going to explore what I'm going to call the creation story of the Anunnaki. And we're not going to start with the Anunnaki. We're going to start with sort of the first civilization. And I think it's interesting, and I want you guys to jump in whenever you can. I've got a script here that I'm kind of trying to get through, but the point is, we don't hear much about the world's first civilization. When I say that, what does that mean to you? I know you're not coming at this cold, but when I say to you, what was our world's first civilization? What's the name that comes to mind?
Well, Sumerians.
Yes. And now, would you say that you learned a lot about ancient Sumeria in World Civ?
No, nothing.
I wouldn't say I learned much at all. I think we spent like a day on it or something, and it was very confusing, and there were these strange, pictographs of these dudes with beards, and that's about all I remember. But so I really feel like there's a lot of mystery around Sumeria, and now that's modern day Iraq. Okay, You've heard about that.
Motherland.
Mm-hmm. Now, the Sumerians gave us a lot of stuff. They gave us the modern calendar. That calendar is based on lunar cycles. They gave us the counting system for geometry. They gave us the way we measure time. I know Jason's particularly interested in that. They gave us the wheel, the plow, irrigation systems, including levees and canals, and sailboats.
Toilets.
I don't know about
Did
that.
They pee? Where did?
I'm sure they peed. I just don't know.
Did they pee? Did they pee? Sumerians were the first to pee, I think.
I'm certain that they must have done that in some way.
They just held it.
They just held it in for
That's why they didn't live that long.
several hundreds of thousands of years. I'm imagining plumbing. I didn't list that, but we usually credit the Romans for that. But regardless, I think the other thing we could say that we got was the first known language. And evidence of the first recorded writing.
In tablet form?
Yes. Yes, we're going to talk about the tablets.
Like iPad.
The first glass pads. Are we going to be doing any video, or we just can't see it?
You just can't see it.
Okay. I can't look at myself and see how ridiculous I look today with my hurt paw. All right, so the Sumerians and so many contributions to humanity. So I don't know why we don't learn much more about them, because, I mean, clearly this was a very advanced civilization. And maybe, so I'm wondering, and I don't know, I'm not going to say it was deliberate, but I have to wonder, why don't we, maybe it's just our country that's not learning more about it. Probably in Arabic civilizations and, Iran, Iraq, those places, I'm sure they know all about it, because that's their living history. That's where they're from. But I'll say in our Western culture, I feel like for the most part we dismiss the Sumerian story as mythology.
Really?
As mythology.
Yeah, maybe.
Like we wrap it up in a bunch of stories and say, "Oh, isn't that interesting?"
So what do we think the first?
Well, so
do we just go with the Egyptians or something?
Well, hey, that's later.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
well,
that's later.
I guess I don't know what I thought before I knew about Sumerian.
Yeah. See? I was confused too when I started thinking about what we're going to chat about today. I'm like, okay, where does this begin? And so we're going to get there. But
well, we are going to get there. But going back to what you were saying, why don't we learn about this, is because I think they're not even really teaching like World War I anymore. I mean, it's like we're so short-term memory about everything, let alone like the beginning of time.
Sure.
So,
sure.
I mean,
somebody had to have enough intelligence to create our system of time. They had to understand that it takes, 365 days to get for a cycle, which is a year, and, how many minutes, and divided up in a day and hours and seconds and all that stuff. I mean, like, where did they come up with that?
Why shouldn't I know that? Why shouldn't everybody know that? Why shouldn't I have just grown up knowing that, like George Washington and Lincoln? Why shouldn't I just know that the Sumerians created all that?
But you don't.
No, I learned it much later.
I didn't
crazy.
learn it during the time we were supposedly learning about this. I didn't learn it then either. So just goes to show you there's a level of indoctrination that occurs as a child that you see that is very rooted in the culture and very rooted in, some collective agenda. Yeah, whatever it is. I mean, it doesn't even have to be nefarious, though it could be. It certainly is astounding to me that we don't know, that this is not normal knowledge. But thank goodness for the interwebs. Now we have access to some of these tablets. So what do we know about the earliest civilization? So in 1849, the British archaeologists discovered 14 tablets that were in that what was Samaria, Iraq. Now, these are the oldest known writings, and they date back to the 24th century BC. And these tablets, from what I understand, put a whole new spin on other sacred texts that you've heard of. And so I'm going to start with a little bit of information, and then we're going to just flow. So those tablets refer to the father of all beginnings. What's that? Who's that? Some kind of supreme being? Some one infinite creator type of thing? That they don't use that word. It's the father of all beginnings. And the tablets say that the creators so Genesis, the Garden of Eden, so polytheistic gods, which means there's a lot of them, right? They're otherworldly beings. What does that mean? Otherworldly. Extraterrestrial. Yes. And tablets 1 and 2 tells who they are and where they're from. And tablet 3, we're not going to go into those tablets. You guys can look at them yourselves. But tablet 3 tells of the 6 days of creation. And is that 6 days of creation, or is that just settling here on Earth? Makes you wonder. So some 445,000 years ago, guys, creator gods came to Earth. And they're called Anunnaki.
This was in the tablets.
Yes.
This is written
Yes.
in the tablets
Yes.
that they found. So this is not something where...
Yes, which is why it's very interesting we're not learning much about it.
Yeah, agreed.
So the word Anunnaki means those who from heaven to earth came.
Well, what were the tablets? Is there a name for the Sumerian
There's
tablets?
Sumerian
It's
tablets.
just called the Sumerian. There wasn't another name
No,
for it.
that's what they're called.
Well, there was 7 gods, Sumerian gods. One of them was An, which was the god of the sky, and Annuna meant
His mother.
it was like prince.
Oh, Inanna is one.
Princely offering.
Annuna, yeah.
Annuna was princely offering. So that's, I mean, the term Anunnaki was just, it wasn't their own term. It was a term the Sumerians gave.
It was. So it's very clear there were this group from the outside coming in, and the Sumerians were left behind. Now we're going to get to that, but what we're talking about now, tablets, 1 and 2, who they are and where they came from.
So when exactly, well, not exactly, but when precisely were the Sumerians immediately, like, when did their culture thrive? Was that...
I don't actually
know.
Because
Because that was like, hundreds of thousands of years after the Anunnaki were here.
Well, the Anunnaki were here for a long time. And living among the Sumerians, and when they finally left the planet, the Sumerians were left to rule Earth, but to do so with the Creator's blessing. So that gets to the creation of humans and why humans were created. But I am not there yet. So the Anunnaki, they're from a planet called
Nibiru.
You got it. Now, this planet only enters our solar system every 3,600 years.
It's on a long orbit.
Very much so. And apparently, the tablets also share that Nibiru's atmosphere was deteriorating. And in order to restore it, they needed an important element that we happen to have a lot of here a long time ago. Do you know what that was?
Gold.
Yes.
See, but here's the thing. All right, I'm with you. But if these guys were so smart to be able to basically alter us, change our DNA,
Yeah.
why couldn't they figure out a gold substitute?
Maybe there isn't. When you're talking about elemental things, the nature of reality and the structure of elements, there is no substitute.
And it was also like hypothesized that it wasn't just gold, it was white gold powder that they used. So it was refined gold, and it was a certain kind of gold.
Well, I mean that's perhaps truthful, but the gold nanoparticles we know today can be used to repair a damaged ozone layer. And in fact, it shields radiation very well, and that's why NASA uses it. Gold foil is all on the outside of lunar cruisers. The International Space Station. You'll see gold foil on all of the outer space things that leave Earth to go there because it has superior shielding capabilities.
It's monatomic gold.
That's right. So it's a very important in that. So, and then Michael Tellinger talks about the gold mines in South Africa, and he is stated very clearly and has a lot of different kinds of evidence about that the gold was mined there and just how much of it was mined. that there was a lot of it. and you know, he contends that there, you know, spaceships would come and pick it up and just take it off planet, you know. But regardless of that,
Who was that you just?
Michael Tellinger,
Okay.
he's got a great accent.
South Africa.
Yeah.
Oh, he's got a great accent. So, regardless of this, you know, Nibiru, 3,600 year cycle. Apparently, that's where they're from.
Now, this is Planet X, right?
Planet X,
Okay.
Yeah.
potentially Planet 9.
Which keeps getting talked about quite often. We're starting to talk about it again.
It does.
2002, it was talked about. Then
It
like
keeps coming back.
2012, it was.
keeps
We
coming
keep
back.
talking about it. I wish we need to get some photos and it actually to be real, but
Well,
we keep
you know,
talking about it.
I wonder what that's going to look like.
The James Webb
Yeah, I mean, I
could
think
actually discover that. I mean, if it's there.
It
entirely
may have
possible.
already.
Yes,
We're not
right.
allowed to talk about it, but not to get tangential, so we're going to get back to the Anunnaki. So now, when they arrived here, they were capable, they lived lives that spanned thousands of years, okay? Hundreds of thousands of years. So
They had elongated heads too, correct? Is that the ones that
That's what we
that they
see
speculate?
on African walls, and you know,
Right.
they're
that's what we see. It's unclear to me
crystal skulls.
if that's them or another species, but
That's the hybrids, I believe. That
it's just not clear to me. Yeah, it's not clear to me. If I have some disconnects in my knowledge, and that is one of them. And are the Anunnaki also the Egyptian race? Also the elongated skulls? I'm not sure about any of that, because there's definite evidence that there's different species here. You know, the Mayans don't look African. The Africans don't look, you know, Egyptian. I mean, they all look different. So there's a potential for different races, and I think they maybe coexist here.
because
Not just Anunnaki. The difference is that the Anunnaki, what I'm going to posit is that the theories suggest that the hypotheses suggest the Anunnaki made us.
Right.
And that's what I'm talking about today.
right.
That's the only reason I'm differentiating. I'm sorry. Go
Well, I
ahead.
was just going to say, if you look at some of the ancient artwork, there was, you know, African-looking, you know, sculptures
Yes.
in South America. How would
Yes.
they know, you know? Like,
Oh, certainly. The Indian, the American Indians, or the Indian culture talked about the ant people. There was people that lived inside the earth. I mean, there was a whole nother race of race that it didn't even have to be extra.
And we're not
It was
even talking
terrestrial.
about reptilian races
That's
that
right.
supposedly live,
Yeah.
you know, in the inner earth either. Not even covering that, because
Right.
it's not the same group. I believe they are all separate races. I believe they are. And I'm still trying to piece it all together in my head.
Well, that
but
makes sense to me.
but
I mean, I could see it. There
think
could be
they're
many,
different.
many, many more that
yes.
haven't even been talked about.
Well, I think so. But so back to the Anunnaki. So if they're living lives that span hundreds of thousands of years, right? There's evidence that the Bible talks about that. The Egyptian Book of Kings, the pharaohs, they lived a long time. Okay, so we don't. So they weren't us.
Emerald tablets
weren't
got
us.
into this too, didn't it?
That's when we get to Egypt.
Oh boy.
That's when we get to Egypt. So again, it starts to get murky for me about it. Who's on first? What's on second? I don't
Right,
know. He's
right,
on third.
Right.
But what I want to say is, let's get back to the Anunnaki. So they created a mining settlement that they called Eridug. 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 And that was the first Earth station. Number one.
Yeah.
And that was in the Persian Gulf. And their leader was a dude named Enki. You guys ever heard of Enki?
Yankee.
You remember the first story that we ever learned in Western civilization?
Adam and Eve.
Yeah, but the story of Enki and Enlil?
I know the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, they're brothers.
they are.
Yeah,
They are
one
brothers.
was good, one was evil. That kind
Well,
of. Well, right. But that's to
okay.
simplify it, right?
Yeah, you're getting into biblical duality. But I'll just say Enki was the leader. And the tablets do talk about that, quote, after the kinship was descended from heaven, it was in Eridug. That's what the tablet says. That's what the heavens means up.
Oh.
As above, so below. Mm-hmm. Which is a Hermetic principle. Also, pretty much universal. So, of course, these the visitors, the Anunnaki, were not alone. They brought another race with them. Because somebody has to work. So they brought a worker race with them called the Igigi. The Igigi were the ones that served the Anunnaki by mining gold. And the tablets talk about, as the civilization grew, the Igigi, the work got harder and harder and harder, and the Igigi rebelled. And there's depictions of this on the walls in ancient Sumeria. Some of these ancient art shows the Igigi uprising. And of course, the Anunnaki, being superior in technology and taller and bigger and all of that, crushed them.
Why do I imagine the Igigi looking like Ewoks?
Yeah, they're smaller. They're not as the tablets that show it. There's pictures of them, and we'll put them on the screen.
Did you happen to see that picture I shared that I created with the AI?
You created that?
Mm-hmm. It was cool. That looks. That's pretty
that
cool.
was interesting. That seemed like a real.
But I mean, it took centuries for them to rebel, but they just wouldn't work anymore. Kind of sounds like what we have going on here now, doesn't it? Where the workers are rebelling. So guess what? The Anunnaki needed to create a new worker class.
So that's what we need.
Because after the Igigi rebelled and were nearly annihilated by their Anunnaki masters, they didn't have enough people to work. They didn't have enough bodies to work. So that's when Enlil told Enki. Enlil's the overlord, and told Enki, hey, you need to go make some. Why don't you create a new race of workers that are from here? And that's what Enki did. And so, hence, we started off our chat about chimpanzees, certainly using a modern man, an ancient Homo sapien type DNA. Enki worked and worked and worked until he got it right. But
there was a lot of little mistakes along the way.
Yeah.
Also, this helps to explain the missing link piece.
Yes.
That everybody talks about.
It was deliberate. So you think about we hear stories of minotaurs, right?
Right.
So imagine you're Enki and you're like trying to create this new race of workers. You're going to the strongest creatures that you can find. Horses, a centaur. You're going to bulls and oxen, a minotaur. Half man, half goat, Sagittarius. Like what are you going to create? You're going to try it with different, cat, half human.
Chickens.
Well, who knows? Yeah, birds, exactly.
Little
birds,
chicken humans. Yeah.
So you're going to try a lot of different genetic experiments to see which ones
That'd
hit,
be
right?
Fun.
So, some take and some don't. Well, something takes. And you have a new race. And it's my understanding that at first they were sterile, so they had to be recreated. They lived a long time, but they had to be created. They would get hurt. They would perish. I don't know if at this point they were ensouled. They could have just been sort of drone-like. I don't know.
They were shoeless.
Definitely shoeless. I don't really know. But, a genetic hybrid between Earth's caveman, Homo erectus, and the Anunnaki themselves. made in the image of God, right? We are made in the image of God. So you start to see parallels to the Bible and the different things that we have learned about. And the tablets called the first man, you ready? The Adamu. In Hebrew, Adam means man. And the Anunnaki put those Homo sapiens to work in the mines and elsewhere in Mesopotamia, dredging rivers and creating all the great infrastructure that we all know about. And the Semitic word AVOD, avad, or worship, literally means work for. So early man had the opportunity to worship their gods. It's all coming into focus, isn't it?
Okay, so wait a minute.
Yeah.
We're all talking about this story like this is what happened.
The story. Well, no, we're not. I'm weaving a tale. I'm weaving a hypothesis.
But
I'm not saying it happened.
No, but
I'm paralleling it.
Yeah, but if the Bible is just a bizarre story, also,
it is,
and we take that on.
It's
That's why when I open my mind to this, and I often think about the Bible portion. Like, sure, the Bible's that's a pretty damn big tale too. So this one, I could see it being real also. Plus, the other thing is, much of what you're talking about was found in tablets, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
It's all in there.
That's the cool part.
It is, and
whether that
Paul
was a
Wallace,
woven story or not, it was done way, way, way back.
And you guys know Paul Wallace, right? The fifth kind, pastor in the Catholic Church. He's done a series of videos that are far more in depth about this one point that you just made, that relate the ancient Sumerian stories and how they predate the Bible, and they are mirror images. The Bible is a mirror image of the Sumerian stories with some names changed.
It's also kind of like a confirmation bias where, over a certain lineage, you just learn what's handed down to you, and you don't really question anything. And whatever, kind of like with us and our podcasts that we listen to and our radio shows and our YouTube videos,
Sure.
We're searching answers that kind of fall in line with what we're, So, of course, we're going to have a group of people that do kind of gravitate towards this. But then you have the rest of the world that falls in line, that big, long line that only believe in what, they're taught. Right. And they don't question it.
Or nothing at all. Or the Darwin theory. That's, just all happened from a lightning bolt. Or whatever it is,
Well, for me, it's always been about questioning everything. I was just sharing the story with somebody else. I have a feeling you guys are like this too. I don't know why I question authority since I was a child. It's never been otherwise. And I guess it's just what I'm here to do. And I don't do it in an angry way. I don't do it in an obstinate, stubborn way. But I'm curious. And I'm always pushing boundaries. And you guys are too. And that's what we're here to do, is just like probe. Just keep pushing. I don't know if any of this is true, but I know there's an historic set of tablets. There's 14 tablets that say a bunch of stuff that seems to relate to a bunch of stuff that we have learned about in different contexts. And
they're real things.
They're absolutely real things. This is not.
And they also
fake.
pick up again over in Egypt.
Yes.
So there are other tablets that go back to these original tablets also.
They are.
So,
yes.
It's not just out of thin air. It could be out of thin air, but it's out of somebody who was 425,000 years ago thin air.
425,000.
Well, it was like Zacharias Hitchens went and he looked at the tablets, years and years and years ago, and he saw them in a different light.
Yes.
And he was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Look at this.
And he was not classically trained to do this kind of stuff, but I mean, I think a lot of folks really appreciate his contribution because the really, really, academic folks who were doing this work were not telling as good of a story as he was, and it wasn't interesting.
Well, I don't even think people...
But he popularized this
as
a
extraterrestrial.
Absolutely.
Rather than just ancient,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we just have this vision of ancient people, being very, black and white, right? And that sepia-toned, mindset we have. But it wasn't like that. It couldn't have been like that.
How long did it take for them to decipher these tablets? So the thing about the tablets are, obviously, who's deciphering them? What are they coming up with? How are they, what did they see that others didn't see? Or there we go. How long did that take to decipher them? And do they know that that's pretty damn accurate?
About 20
they
minutes.
have it? Yeah.
20
minutes.
I'll say that, I cannot remember the name of the academic that created the cipher that ultimately broke the code. I don't know the person's
it's the hash mark looking thing, right?
Cuneiform.
Yeah.
But Paul Wallace talks about this. And, a lot of folks do. I can't remember the gent's name. But yes, they have been translated, and then new interpretations have been pushed forth.
Right.
And Paul Wallace is partnered with the Vatican's biblical scholar who's left the church, but who was in charge of the entomology of the Vatican for many years.
Is it Eric von Daniken?
It is not, but he's Mr. Chariot of the Gods, who brought forth the ancient aliens concept.
He
also
popularized
but
it
it's
again
Mario Bruni, I think. He is an Italian who is with Paul Wallace, who just written a book with him that is doing these most modern interpretations of these tablets right now. And so the things I'm sharing with you are the most current viewpoint of what those tablets said and how they relate to our Bible, Book of Genesis, Old and New Testament. So it's very, very relevant.
I find it really interesting that the long years that they lived, and the long years that the original humans lived. Correct?
Right.
Much longer from what they're saying.
Well, I think
much longer.
There's a code. It's the genetic code can be turned on and off, and
the Nephilim.
And if we're not there yet, if you choose to turn DNA on or off, that will your longevity is controlled by the telomeres, right? And JP said this before. If you're coming from a different civilization and it takes 3,600 years to get around the orbit, what's a year to you? What is time? How does time age you? What does aging look like? Just like if you're on Venus versus Mars, gravity affects you differently. So time is relative. And they lived a lot longer because they had mastered DNA, but also maybe because time was just different for them. So let's say the Anunnaki have left. Let's say they came here, they created this gold mining thing, and they interfered with our society, and they went back up in their spaceships back to their planet and took all that gold to go fix their planet. Presumably, that's what it's for. And or find another planet, whatever. But they haven't come back for a long time, it seems. Right?
Well,
but we're told that they are coming back. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
How many cycles would it have been for this planet to have come around since the 425,000 years? They say it's on a 3,600-year cycle.
They do.
So it could have come and gone many times in between here and now.
But we've only been exploring space since the 50s.
No. Right.
We haven't been able to see anything since then.
Right.
So the question is, are we in a cycle now? Are we at the point where the Anunnaki are coming back? Now, if you listen to some of the ufologists, they will say They're docked outside of Saturn right now, waiting. But whatever, that's a different story. That's not what we're talking about today. That is very much hearsay. What we're talking about is much more written in stone, literally.
Yeah, right.
So if we're talking about the beginning of the human race, I want to get back to that. Enki created a human species that could work. Eventually, that human species, it was sterile at first, but they got tired of recreating new ones, so they let them procreate. So we were allowed to procreate after that. And of course, you talked about the Nephilim, and you guys have heard of the Watchers. I know you know this story. Do you want to tell the Watcher story?
Nope. Your voice works perfect.
The Watcher story. The Watchers were, so the main Anunnaki people ascended in their spaceships and said, okay, we're going to leave you all here in charge. Here's the rules. You're in charge. They left some Watchers, some, quote, Watchers. And the Watchers decided that they were bored. Been here a long time. Let's procreate with the human women. They're beautiful. And then they did. And that's the fallen angels. The fallen angel story. And...
okay, but...
Yeah?
Okay, but they were pretty big.
Oh, yeah. And they created a race of giants.
Okay, right.
As a result,
there we go.
the Nephilim are the race of giants. Mm-hmm. Because the Anunnaki themselves were very tall.
The sex parts don't match up.
I don't know how they did it. How did they do it? I have no idea.
It's got to be. It had to be ugly.
I have no idea.
Ugly. How that happened? If that was it.
I don't know how it happened.
Unless they were proportioned like me. It'd been pretty easy.
There's just people exploding all over the place. I don't think it would.
I had the same thought that I don't know how on earth that could possibly be, but
maybe they were really big, but they had tiny little weenies. Maybe they were like 12-footers, but they had little thimbles, and it worked. And it worked.
I can't imagine it.
Yeah.
I can't imagine it.
I don't know how it worked either. That's always bugged me.
I honestly don't know. It could just be hearsay, but it seems like there was a race of giants that are half giants that came. Yep. It's in the lore of so many cultures that
it is.
I can't believe it's not true.
Well, and there's been tons of bones found.
Well,
Okay, there it is again. They'll take the bones and put them in a museum under a rug somewhere. We're never going to see them, but
there's a lot of evidence
lots
of that.
Of them.
Well, so giants, weird animal creations, minotaurs, human hybrids, and lots of human beings now populating the planet. Well, Nibiru comes back around. Enlil is not real happy. This is me making this up. Enlil might not be very happy, and we learn there might be some solar activity that could cause some destruction on the planet. So Enki loves a few of the humans that he created and the ones that he trained. And he says, hey, this cataclysm's going to happen. There's going to be a big flood. Everything's going to be flooded. And the guy we know as Noah takes some people off, gets them in a ship, 2 by 2, the animals, people, saves the genetic code. And sure enough, it hits. Kills off, all around. Kills off so many people. Buries cities underneath water. And Enlil's just fine with that. But Enki was not. So 40 days and 40 nights, it rained. And then we're back in business. And there's some evidence that was a solar event that created that.
Really?
Not a meteor, not a comet, but a solar event that created it. So
an EMP.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that would cause it to rain.
I think on one of our other podcasts, I called it an EVP.
You
Do
did,
you remember that?
yeah.
And I just went on like
Yeah.
I knew what I was talking
I
about.
didn't say
EMP. You did.
EVP,
You
yeah.
should have corrected me.
Nah,
Oh
it's
my
okay.
gosh.
I almost said it just now, actually.
Did you?
Yes.
But if there was a solar flare, powerful enough, it could probably bust the
it could.
the shield of ice that purportedly protected the Earth.
Well, that's part of it. So when
Causing the
Nibiru supposedly came back around, this is written in the tablets, when Nibiru, called the Destroyer, came back around,
Planet X.
it's called the Destroyer. Not in the tablets. It's in a Celtic text called the Kolbrin, Kolbrin. In the Kolbrin, Nibiru is called the Destroyer. This is an ancient Scottish gospel. And like many other gospels, this was omitted from the biblical text, like the Gnostic gospels and some other things. And I'm going to give you a translation that I found. Men forgot the days of the Destroyer. Only the wise know where it went and that it shall return at the appointed time. The Destroyer, its color, bright and fierce and ever-changing. So that's out of the Kolbrin. So that's when the floods happen. The day of the deluge. So we have the Noah story. We have it written in other texts. We have it in those tablets. And it wiped out a lot of humanity. And then the ones that survived were in ships, whether they were arks, as the Christian Bible talks about, or they were spaceships. I don't know. It's not knowable. However, we do know that happened. No one disputes that there was a flood. So, the flood comes back. The chosen ones built some boats. Earth is back. Sea levels where they were about.
Earth is back. Back
Dun,
again.
dun, dun. Are you going to do some Slim Shady rapping over there for me?
Some freestyle.
I would love that.
Andrew's gonna
Could see
throw
Noah
some
doing
bars.
it.
Yes.
No one throwing down on the ark. Earth is back.
Well, so that's the end of the Anunnaki creation story. There's a lot more to it, but I just wanted us to kind of weave around here. And really what I wanted to share was that let's assume they left us at this point. Went back up into their spaceships and went somewhere else. Left the Sumerian leaders to run Earth, and which they did for a long time. What we haven't talked about are the bloodlines.
Yeah.
And
The Tower of Babel.
well, so if we talk about the bloodlines for just a second, it's said that there are the royal bloodlines are descended from Enki and the Anunnaki gods. And so all the royalty that we have had across our planet in different cultures have an uninterrupted, can trace an uninterrupted bloodline back to the original men.
And that's some truth
And
in there,
women.
right? I mean, they
Yes.
have done that where
Yes.
it's unbelievable the connection between the leaders of our country, especially too, right?
Yes. And there's
That's crazy.
Well, there's some esotericness to this too. What I mean by that is, the blood is talked about in many ancient texts, whether they're Ayurvedic, whether they're Christian, the Quran, Islam. The power of the blood is noted in those texts. Why? So, if you think about the body having an energy center, and your blood is the activation of the body, it animates the body. What it contains is very important. The elements that it contains. Inside your body, the blood, the DNA, is the history of your every ancestor you have. Whether they had a famine, whether they had a flood, their survival, what they learned, what they failed at, it's all in you. And you can imagine it's if you pollute that with if you don't keep it pure. At least this is the theory. If you don't keep it pure, what's the impact of that energetically? What's the impact of that on you as a being that can ascend? Now, I don't know the answer to that. There are other people who are more equipped to answer it, but these are things I've been told matter. So it's also a way, if you can control the bloodline and the ancestral record, you can control people. And it's very interesting to me that we have those 13 families that we've talked about. You've talked about.
Well, you're talking about controlling people, and you're talking about creation and all that.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I don't know if you heard Michael Tellinger tell the story about this farmer in Minnesota. He had contact with, I don't know what race, but it was some ETs that would visit this guy, and they would visit him not only in contact form, but also telepathically.
What'd they look like?
I don't remember. I mean, that wasn't part of the story that I heard. It was just this race of ETs.
What they look? That's all I want to know.
They probably looked like grays. And so a MUFON agent went out to talk to this guy about some stuff that's going on his property. And he's like, before he left, he's like, oh, by the way, can you ask these ETs about the Anunnaki? And the guy was like, I don't know what that is. Can you explain what that is? And he explains what it is. He's like, okay, yeah, sure. And the MUFON agent drives away. And before he even gets out of town, he gets a call from this farmer. He's like, I talked to him. And he explains that this race says that the Anunnaki have been cast out of the Book of Life because of the corruption that they did with human life. Because what they were here for was for the gold, but it wasn't for what we think it was. It was because they were constantly on the run. They were not liked they were cast out of the Book of
Like
Life.
space pirates.
Space pirates.
We were created by space pirates.
Well, I want to follow up on what you're saying. Keep going.
Well, okay, so my theory is the gold is the protective shield from not just being seen by any kind of radar or whatever, but also to protect telepathic.
Like superior cloaking.
Right.
For both telepathic and radiation.
Right. And so they needed the gold for that, or else they were going to be wiped out. In my theory is they've been wiped out. They're gone.
Cool.
Cool
theory.
If you look at like Kepler 182 or whatever this planet that we've found that is Goldilocks, for life. We can't see that close to see if there is life there. Like, so before we had that shield on Earth, right?
Yeah.
Before the flood.
Yeah.
So these ETs could probably know, is that
We were keep going.
We were quarantined.
Right. So there was like a very ancient, race of humanoid here. You had the Homo erectus.
Yep.
You had these cave people, and then when the Anunnaki got here, they defied the laws of nature
and the cosmos,
and they altered our DNA.
Yes,
which is like not a good idea.
And already evolving primates. That is something that Linda Moulton Howe talks about all the time.
Yes.
And she says it every time.
Yeah,
already evolving, and she does that specifically.
Yeah, she's right. Yeah.
because we were on our way.
But before, we could have been, as an earlier species, more enlightened. So what they did was what Michael Tellinger calls, hold on, let me look at this. It's called blank slate. So what they did, the Anunnaki did, is they created this hybrid worker, this person, that made it very, very difficult for them to find enlightenment. So when they passed on from their current life, beings can make a choice of whether they go back or they move on to something else, like a whole different thing. You know,
reincarnation.
You could reincarnate or you could move on to the next thing. Yeah. They didn't have that choice.
Right.
When they passed on, they were basically doomed. It's like karmic law, you know, like other races didn't have karmic law because they were enlightened. Here's my theory, is that when humans have any kind of consumption of psychedelics, they enter that enlightenment that other species are always in.
Yeah.
We're taking a glimpse of what other species are always in. So like the DMT, when you're about to pass on, and you can see there's other races that come to you. There's
other dimensions, though, right? Aren't they
there's
dimensionals?
they're dimensionals, and that's another thing, is like that the white gold powder has been theorized that it helps with your energy, it helps with healing power, you know, and it also helps with interdimensional travel.
Oh, okay.
So, you know,
this
these
is new information for me.
These dimensional beings that people see when they're about to pass on, that's from that DMT, that is, you know, that fuels the part of the Anunnaki that wanted to erase that from. They didn't want these workers to be enlightened. They wanted them just to work. They didn't want any kind of pushback.
Yeah. So instead of moving on, you have to keep recycling.
And that's the way that we've been. And you've got the bloodline.
Yep.
The bloodline that keeps it. They're already enlightened.
Yep. Yeah. They have some of the skills that we would have had.
The Anunnaki
telepathy and
the Anunnaki is gone now. And guess what?
Interesting.
David Icke has brought it to our attention, and people probably know before, is the reptilians that are here weren't ever here before. Like, I don't know. This is the first time I've heard about like the Anunnaki bringing other races here.
Yeah, the Ajiji.
But I don't think probably there was any other races before that.
You mean reptilian?
Other
no
than
negative races. I don't think there were any other negative races.
I don't think there was.
When did the reptilian come in?
The Draco reptilians are a
When
negative
did the
race.
Dracos come in? You said.
I don't know. It was after.
After Anunnaki.
Yeah.
When the quarantine was destroyed.
Right.
Yeah, the gold quarantine. And all the races were able to come in after that. This feeds a lot of other things that we've heard. But we'll stay on this thread. I too agree that the Anunnaki so defiled and defied cosmic law by doing what they did, that their ascension, if they still exist at all, is so tied to our ascension. And they can't finish their karma to ascend to the next dimension until we go. It's like, you know, we're pulling them down because we keep hitting this road speed limiter, right? We can't get to that next level of ascension. We can't get to that frequency. And so their karma is so tied to us. And until we are able to organically ascend they will never get out of this karmic cycle that they're in either. So if they're still alive, and I can't imagine they're all gone, they're in that same cycle. And the Law of One talks about this. The Law of One, and I don't know if Ra, the social memory complex, was Anunnaki. I'm not suggesting that, but the Law of One does talk about the karmic connection between all beings in the same solar system, which is the same logos. All beings in the same logos have a karmic connection. And so we all can ascend, but you're only as strong as your weakest link. Remember that saying, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So, I think there's a limitation.
I feel like what we're talking about is starting to turn into alien pudding. I think we're talking, but I think can we? You're talking about karma, which that makes sense, but you're talking about karma and ascending. I don't know if many people.
No, they probably don't. We haven't talked about this before, but I needed to leverage off of what JP was saying because it is.
Karma isn't exactly what people think. In your way of describing karma, what you're thinking as karma isn't necessarily the karma that everybody says. What comes around goes around. That's not necessarily.
Well, that's not even really karma.
No, it's not.
Well, okay.
So we should do the cosmic laws at another time, but I'm not describing that right now. But I agree with you. It might be a little confusing. So just, put a pin in it to say that,
right.
The idea of balance and everything must be in balance in the universe. And in order for that balance to continue, if you break a law, there has to be a counterbalancing reaction. If we can agree to that, karma is to some extent that counterbalancing reaction on a bigger scale and very complicated. So we'll leave it there.
Okay.
But you can't grow and be more enlightened. You can only grow so far if others aren't coming with you.
Where's that info coming from?
I can't remember the name of the law. Yeah.
So what we do know, if we were to,
it's a spiritual law.
Just if we were to simplify all this, what we've been talking about tonight, because it seems like this is already kind of way out there from the beginning of what we're talking about. So we had another race, came down here.
Yes.
They messed with already evolving primates. Mm-hmm. They changed them into a bunch of things, but eventually they came down to the one thing, us.
Yes.
Where does the soul fit into that? Wait. Let's finish that story. They came down. They did that. Now there's us. They used us as a slave species to get the gold. We're enamored by gold. I find that interesting. The gold, it's just this piece of metal, but we can't get enough of it. It's interesting that way. So, okay, gold, for whatever reasons they needed it. Apparently Nibiru, Planet X, is where they came from. It's on our cycle. Mm-hmm. It goes around the sun, but on a big, giant eclipse. Mm-hmm. Comes around every 3,600 years. So eventually they went back, and when they went back, they still left some people here and said, take care of this.
Yeah. The Watchers.
The Watchers.
Yes.
And when they did, the Watchers intermingled, which they weren't supposed to.
Yes.
Which created a whole nother mess.
Well, see, according to Sitchins, that was in vitro. It wasn't like we were talking about.
Okay.
It
wasn't.
No,
yeah,
it wasn't
okay.
actual.
I get behind that.
It probably couldn't have been the other way.
Yeah. So, okay, they were larger, different people. Okay, that all happened.
Who knows?
The original people came back. The original gods, or whatever you want to call them, the boss came back. Didn't like what he saw. Flooded the place out. After the flood, we started again. Mm-hmm. Then what? Now here.
And here we are.
Okay, where does the soul come into all that?
Well, like whose soul?
Ours. How do we get a soul? And so I've heard this before with the idea that you're talking about, is that because we were created the way we were created, we have a soul, but we don't have the ability to just go into the light and be the light. We have to recycle. We have to constantly recycle. That's kind of part of being a slave.
That's what they call the karmic trap.
Okay.
That is where, even though us as beings have souls,
Right.
ours are different because of what the Anunnaki did.
Okay.
Because if they didn't alter our DNA and cause their own misfortunes, which we're not the only species that they did that possibly. Right. They could have done it to many other species. But they took away our conscious ability to make a choice in our own timeline during our life, and
they robbed us of our youth.
Pretty much.
Yeah, well.
Where does the soul come into anything, really? I mean, it's like, as far as what they did and why they were here, and the result is we are completely different because we were destined a different way, like already evolving primates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and it's just so weird because we were talking about time earlier and in different episodes and everything. And it's like, why have we not learned about this? Why we were saying that we asked that question
as an option, as a yeah.
But
right,
it's
right,
like, why would we? We stopped learning about so many things.
Right.
There's so many things that we don't learn about. What were the technologies back then versus the technologies 100 years ago versus now?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So we advance, we get a setback. Like perhaps there's things that happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I heard today? And I don't know where, I read it on Reddit, is that you could take every single nuclear bomb that is in existence right now and all the ones prior that are gone, and that's not the same amount of energy that one hurricane creates.
What?
Yeah, because the hurricane has a beginning and an end, and it's constantly creating energy. When the atomic bomb has one explosion, and that energy dissipates immediately.
That's fascinating.
So anyway, like there's so many different ways to look at, I don't know if that's true or not. I'm just saying, that's, just things that you can consider. There's so many different things that you can consider as now as conscious beings. There's ways to look at things and time and dimensions.
I got a question. So let's say it all happened. Now comes into play the Greys.
Okay.
Now the Greys are altering our DNA to some degree, possibly, if you believe in the abduction thing and everything that they've said. Wouldn't they get exiled too?
Not necessarily.
Different theory there.
Because perhaps they're looking to see
to help
if we're Anunnaki. Maybe, I don't know. They could be looking for something.
Maybe
specific.
all that's getting abducted is someone Anunnaki blood.
So there is a theory about the Greys.
Bloodline.
There's a theory about the Greys that the Greys have made themselves extinct.
Okay,
basically,
we're
they
going
cannot.
back to
They can't be fertile anymore. So I'm just going to remind people because you brought it up. So they're taking human eggs and sperm in order to create hybrids because they can't put their soul into a human body.
Right.
They need to put it into a hybrid body.
Right.
The hybrid body can contain a gray soul.
The frequencies. The human body cannot hold it. That's why. And there's even another hypothesis that these they're incarnating in certain gray souls are incarnating, trying to go through the birth process, the forgetting and all that, in order to, because you have to forget. You can't be born here with your memory.
That's one of the rules that you talked about.
Except for that one kid that was in.
Well, it malfunctions.
Yeah,
But
there's
not
quite a few of those. Yeah.
It malfunctions, but eventually they forget too. Eventually they do.
So this is all wrapped up in the Matrix. So all of it, the Anunnaki, it's all the Matrix.
It's the gray pill.
Yeah.
So we were talking about the beginning of human civilization. That's the whole point of this gray area.
Right.
Is the beginning of human civilization. This is an alternate view. It also coincides with ancient texts that we have learned about.
That's what I like about it, because it was written down.
Yes, and it's been written down in multiple ways.
Yep.
So I think that is a bona fide hypothesis that at least we can play around with for a while. And I think figuring out the other stuff's going to take a little bit longer. And I hope the next one we're going to talk a little bit more about Egypt. There's a whole lot to unpack in Egypt.
Oh, I like the Egypt. The Emerald Tablets.
Oh man, we could spend a lot of time on that and the Hermetic texts, because it is related. But I think this Anunnaki conversation has been a great way for us to really kick off the karmic connections between people, and what it means to ascend and in soul inside of a body. So
we should do Soul Week like they do Shark Week.
let's do.
You know,
it.
This is just to kick off Soul Week.
Soul Week on Gray Area.
On Gray Area.
The weight of the soul.
How much does it weigh? A feather?
6.62 grams. What is that?
It does. Yes, you're right.
There is it. What is it?
6.2.
6.2 grams.
6.2 grams.
We should talk that. The soul would be a fantastic episode. Just all the different thoughts about a soul. You know, and that goes beyond
the car.
Huh?
The car.
Yeah, the soul that you can break into it so easy.
Supposedly.
Yeah, and what does your soul do when you're sleeping? Or what does it do when your mom's pregnant before you come in?
Oh boy.
When you're incubating?
Goes in and out, in and out.
Yeah. Dolores Cannon has a lot to say about that.
I just listened to her again the other day. She's fascinating.
I know, love her.
She was.
Oh.
Yeah, she passed.
It's so weird
From
when you
this
follow her Facebook page, they post as if it's her.
Yeah.
And it's like, she's like, well, I'm doing good today. I'm like, what is going on here?
It's not Dolores.
She's doing the Art Bell show. Art and her are doing a show every day.
You know they are on the other side.
Yeah.
So
thank you for this wonderful episode of Gray Area, as we learned about the potential roots of our ancient past and why we are who we are and how it all connects.